Hello everybody, hope it's okay. Welcome to a place called Abinger Commom. Now 5 years ago we had the very first edition of the Endorphin Speed, and this was a shoe I was so keen to get hold of. I actually paid double the price by importing it from America. And it's a line of shoes that I've really enjoyed over the last 5 years. I had the second edition here, I had the third edition, and the fourth edition's in Armona, and we roll on now to the fifth edition. Now you might think in this time that the shoe would have evolved. Well, I think the good thing and the bad thing, it hasn't really changed much at all. The Endorphin Speed 1, I think the only difference between then and now, it was just a bit of a narrower base, and I think there was also talk that it was a bit unstable. I never found it unstable at all. And if you think now that we're going into shoes like the Endorphin Elite 2 and the Adios Pro 4, which are sort of racing shoes, which is about as unstable as you could possibly imagine compared to this shoe. I've now worn this shoe for 4 times. I've done a long run in it yesterday, about 13 miles. I did a session of 15 by a minute on Saturday in the boiling heat. I've just done a little hilly run around here, almost a recovery run, and then I did a little shakeout run on Friday. And I think to say that the good thing is that really not much has changed. I think the biggest difference for me is, I don't think anyone else is pointing out, this Achilles flare, very much like a Pegasus. And having had a bit of Achilles problems recently in the last couple of years and really sort of curtail my running, I really do find that very useful. And I found now this is the version of the shoe that's probably the easiest to get on. And you might think, is that the only good thing about the shoe? Well, I think in this day and age, for £180 retail, I was kind of expecting a bit more excitement in terms of the fact that it's something different to what I've got. But in a way, it's kind of a familiar shoe. And one, say, compared to the Evo SL that I struggle with, I got the Rebel V5, I'm gonna have to send them back, they're just so wide for me. This is a shoe that just works for me. Like I said, it's a very familiar ride, and maybe not everyone's actually totally familiar what that sort of ride is. I think by modern day standards, I would actually say this is actually on the firmer side. It's certainly not like a rigidly firm shoe like the Boston 12 and the Boston 13 allegedly is. But in terms of the fact that the foam at the front, it's not a huge amount of stack. I think it's a 28 at the front and 36 at the back, which by, again, modern day standards is not a lot, which meant, I think when I was going along after a few miles, I was starting to sort of feel the front a bit, and it wasn't like discomfort, but it was like a sort of like a fast feeling shoe, a shoe that feels like you want to get on. So when you're doing sort of easy pace, it may be not the best shoe for easy pace, but it's certainly capable of easy pace. It's certainly capable of any pace, I think. It's one of those shoes that's not actually that good at anything, which makes it good for everything as well, if you know what I mean. So if you like a shoe that has a bit of ground feel, but not a huge amount, and I think after a while I was starting to feel the plate a bit, very slightly. So again, that gives a nice lot of sort of stability. I think this is now a very stable shoe, not that I ever found it to be unstable for sure, but if you had any concerns with earlier versions, then certainly won't be the case now. And if you can actually race in this, well, yeah, if you want to, you can race on anything. I mean, I think this would be a good choice if you didn't want to get an out-and-out carbon plate and just felt that it was a bit too stiff. The fact that you can actually bend this now quite a lot is actually interesting. And if I compare that with the second version, I thought that was, yeah, I thought that was sort of slightly more stiffer than compared to what they have been. If you look at the third version here, yeah, I feel like actually that of the four I've got here, this is actually the most bendy one. So in that sense, probably it makes it a bit more useful for more uses. So if we look at the shoe, the upper now is a very nice sort of mesh, almost see-through, very breathable and quite flexible as well. So I'm going to really get my hands in, you can probably even see them. Compared to the initial edition, it was never a bad lockdown in the Saucony ones, but I think they just improved that. So that's a big plus. And I think now they've got the lacing system, although it seems like it's quite tight there, and it's not probably the most narrow of shoes, but equally they're not a wide shoe. I think it's a good compromise so that a lot of foot shapes would fit this shoe, I think. So for me, with a very narrow foot, I've got these tongues quite touching, but although I've got a bit of bunching, it's something I've become accustomed to, and it's not really an issue. And because of the fact you got this lacing here, you can really cinch that down. So I could get that down even more if I really wanted to. Another big advantage, you've actually got a gusseted tongue there. So the Aubrey fans will be very happy with that. And it's pretty much the same insole. If you look at there in the first one, it said Endorphin Speed Roll, and it's still got the same Endorphin Speed Roll 5 editions later. So yeah, another constant there. So I suppose in a way that this is like a very familiar shoe, and you always had that sort of flex there. That's the flex in the fifth one, even got a plastic plate. If I do the same one in the first one, it's actually slightly stiffer. So you might say that actually it's slightly more flexible now, whether it's just a new shoe, I'm not sure. But Otherwise, it's very hard to tell any differences between them. I think when I had the third version, I did think that they sort of dumbed it down a bit. They actually made it wider compared to the first edition there. If you can see that quite noticeably, especially sort of in the middle down at the heel, you can noticeably see that it's a bit wider in the 3. I think the width now between the 3 and the 5, I haven't actually got the 4 with me, it's now quite similar, but you just feel it's a bit more streamlined in the middle now with the 5. And I think they've also improved, or tried to improve, the outsole. I mean, it's been so dry in the UK recently, I haven't had any cause to try it in the rain yet, but you can kind of see there's a nice coverage of rubber here, and it just feels a bit more sort of gluey than some of this stuff, which was one of the problems with the Endorphin Speed, that when it was a bit slippery, it could be a bit of an issue, but I think this one is looking more promising. There's also not too much of it, so you think, well, although there's a fair amount of exposed foam there, it's in all the right places. The insoles, as usual, are removable, so if you want to put a different one in, you can do. The actual plate in this is sandwiched, I think, between the 2 layers here, so it almost conveniently shows you the different layers of them by the different colours, and I think that is the sort of wing of the plate that they call it, which I think was introduced into the third version. You can sort of see the same sort of wing there, so it's quite a similar. And I must say that a lot of people say, oh, the first and the second versions were the grey and it's all dumbed down a bit in the third and the fourth. Well, I always found that they sort of felt like faster in the first and second editions, but when I actually did some shoe offs, I remember I did a 1 against a 4, and it was pretty much identical. So I think, yes, they have got slightly wider, but at the base, but not by a huge amount. Maybe when I did a bit of a shoe off testing, maybe the 2 just felt slightly more springy, but yeah, really little in it. And I was doing those 15 by 1 minute on Saturday, and I was really getting down to some decent paces in very hot weather. I was doing about 5:30, so perfectly adequate for a speed shoe. In terms of the weight, in my size UK 13, it's 300 grams, which is a fraction less than the 4th version, but very small difference, and it's a fraction more than it used to be in the 1st and 2nd editions, which are about 285. So yeah, it's not really a huge difference. I mean, it's a bit disappointing sometimes that shoes have gone slightly up, but I mean, I think you'd be struggling to notice that. Otherwise, I did sort of feel that just sort of the nature of the 5th version, it just feels a bit more streamlined. You've got this little cutout there, which you certainly didn't have in the 3. The 3 looks a bit sort of boring, and I think in a way, when I was trying on the different shoes, the 3 was the one I liked the least, but yeah, as I said, it was very little in it. But I suppose my issue with the Speeds is really, where is this line going? Because they've had 5 editions of it now, and it's just been little tweaks, and I can't think of any other shoe that has sort of changed so little. So if you have been a fan of the Speed and you can't get a version that you really used to like, I think the 5th version is definitely worth looking into. But I think now there's so much more competition in this genre. You've got the Zoom Fly 6, you've got the Evo SL, you've got the Rebel V5, to name 3. Some of those work for me, some of them don't. So I think in that sense, you've got a lot more choice now. But a lot of the time now, I just use carbon racers to go out for runs, even sort of like easy to study runs. So I think this sort of feeling that you must wear or must not wear a carbon racer to actually not race in. I think, well, it's kind of stupid really. I mean, you buy a shoe, you want to enjoy it. I mean, if you wear out a shoe, well, go and buy another one. Plenty of bargains to be had these days. But at least for this one, I did get a 10% discount, ironically from the person I can't name, who seems to have moved on to another company. But anyway, I thought that was kind of amusing. But good to know that his code was still working. So yeah, definitely worth checking out this one. But if you're expecting anything radically different, then you won't. And perhaps that's what you actually want. So is this a shoe that you're interested in? Did you have any of the previous ones? What is your current sort of tempo type shoe at the moment? Or kind of do it all shoe? So I hope you found this interesting. Like and subscribe to that, and see you in the next one. Bye. And for John Broom, we've got a rather nice war memorial. And if you're naughty, presume you used to end up in the stocks here. And we've got the Abinger Hatch pub, so quite a nice little filming location and watering hole. Definitely recommended.